Good afternoon once again and welcome on the World Focus here on SMBC News. My name is Lamin Faal, presenting live from BIS FM 88.5. And in our headlines, the Chief of Defense Staff of the Gambia Armed Forces has said that Generals Ansumana Tamba and Umpamendi, who went into exile with Yahya Jammeh, returned home after falling out with him. Gambian among 5 people injured in Italy's drive-by shooting targeting immigrants. The Independent Electoral Commission (IEC) has announced April 12, 2018 as the date set for electing councillors for the 120 wards across the country, whilst mayoral is set for May 12, 2018. The University of the Gambia Faculty and Staff Association urges IGP to do the right thing and apologize to Dr. Cisse for infringing upon his rights. The Chief of Defense Staff of the Gambia Armed Forces has said that Generals Ansumana Tamba and Umpamendi, who went into exile with Yahya Jammeh, returned home after falling out with him. According to General Kinte, investigations revealed that the two were dissatisfied with the living conditions and had strained relations with the former president in Equatorial Guinea. But investigations are still ongoing, and the two are cooperative in helping the investigators to establish the facts behind their unexpected return. Speaking further at the officers' mess in Kotu, Kinte said the return of the generals on notice was a noticeable breach of airport security. We have acknowledged these lapses at the National Security Council and took full responsibility as a council for the lack of knowledge about the return of these high persons of security interest and the way and manner they were processed on arrival, he stated. Kinte said an independent inquiry has been set up by the government to look into these grave security lapses and proffer solutions to avoid a reoccurrence. On our part, as the Gambia Armed Forces, the two generals are for the moment presumed to be deserters after having stayed away from the armed forces for over a year. We will equally brief the media on the outcome of the investigations once completed, he added. When asked about the threats related to their return, CDS Kinte said so far nothing related to their presence or return points to a threat of national security. Although investigations are still ongoing on a broader scope, there have been several lessons learned from this episode, he added. On the relations with the presidency, Kinte said some people are of the view that the president should just go and visit the military barracks and talk to soldiers, while probably that is another way of making that showmanship that you are in charge. But sometimes it can also send a wrong message. What I can assure you is that it is my responsibility to connect the presidency to the armed forces, and that is a work in progress, he said. According to Cisse, they want to develop a relationship where there would not be direct political interference into the affairs of the armed forces. Kinte said in a situation where the president is putting his nose into every barrack and speaking to every soldier, that can break down the chain of command. We have seen it happen in the past regime. The president was undermining the Chief of Defense Staff by speaking to his subordinates or units under the purview of the Chief of Defense Staff without his knowledge. Those things can undermine the chain of command, and we want an armed forces that is not personalized but remains as an institution where everybody is given space. He said the president is aware of everything happening in the armed forces, and his permission is obtained first before anything can be done on a daily basis on issues of the armed forces. When asked on the relation of the armed forces with the civilians, General Kinte said the general membership of the armed forces love the Gambia and are ready to take a breath to protect its people. The love we have for the country motivated the majority of us to join the armed forces, and that spirit is still in the armed forces. At our level, the ones who have been known to have been involved in rights violations and are in the country were dealt with. The ones who have gone out of the country, we are seeing how best we can bring them to justice. Gambian among 5 people injured in Italy's drive-by shooting targeting African immigrants. Police in Italy have arrested a man suspected of opening fire Saturday on foreign nationals in the town of Macerata, injuring 6 people. A police photo shows a man being apprehended who appears to have an Italian flag wrapped around his neck. The drive-by shootings were racially motivated and believed to be connected to the recent slaying of an 18-year-old Italian woman in which a Nigerian man was arrested. Macerata's Mayor Romano Carancini told CNN. The victims included 5 people from Nigeria and 1 from Gambia. According to Lieutenant Colonel Andrea of the Carabinieri, the shootings took place near where the dismembered body of Pamela Mastropietro was found on Tuesday. The suspect in Saturday's shootings, identified by Carancini as Luca Traini, 28, was apprehended by police while making a fascist salute in front of a monument of war victims. A gun was found in his car. According to election records, Traini had been a candidate in the nearby town of Corridonia for the anti-immigration Northern League Party in the 2017 local elections, but received no votes. Carancini confirmed to CNN that he was the same man. "We must be united against hatred," Carancini said. The shooting underscored racial tensions in Italy ahead of the upcoming national elections. Italy's Northern League Party distanced itself from the shooter, but the party's leader Matteo Salvini said mass migration has caused similar violent acts. "Violence is never the solution. Violence is always to be condemned, and whoever is guilty must pay," Salvini said in a statement posted on social media. "Immigration out of control leads to chaos, anger, and social confrontation." Marco Valerio Vanni, the uncle of the slain woman Mastropietro, told CNN-affiliated Ray News, "All we want is justice. We cannot fight barbarism with more barbarism. Such actions are not justifiable. This country is fed up, but such reactions can never be justified. We are a civilized country. We should not let barbarism prevail our civilization." The Independent Electoral Commission has announced April 12, 2018 as the date set for electing councillors for the 120 wards across the country, whilst mayoral is set for May 12, 2018. In a press release issued, IEC stated, "Sequel to the amendment of Section 194, subsection C of the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia, the IEC will conduct the elections on 2 separate dates. The election of councillors for the 120 wards across the country will be held on Thursday, 12th April 2018, and the election to the offices of mayor, mayoress, chairperson will be on Saturday, 12th May 2018. This decision was arrived at in consultation with the political parties who are among the primary stakeholders of the Commission. The University of the Gambia Faculty and Staff Association urges IGP to do the right thing and apologize to Dr. Cisse for infringing upon his rights. The University of the Gambia Staff Association has responded to a press release issued by the Gambia Police Force dated the 1st of February 2018 as regards to the arbitrary arrest of Dr. Ismaila Cisse, a political science lecturer, thus requesting an apology from the police. The press release stated that following an appeal by the police to disperse the crowd that formed at the entrance of the police headquarters in Banjul in the early hours of February 1st, demanding Dr. Cisse's unconditional release with a public apology, senior police officers, including the police PRO, in attendance had given their word that charges have been withdrawn and that the police will apologize. However, the press release issued a few hours afterwards did not only contradict that promise, but it was also full of misinformation. The release claimed that Dr. Cisse was interviewed until 2200 hours when he was granted self-bail, which he declined to accept. This is a clear misinformation. First of all, it doesn't follow logic that someone who has merely been invited to be interviewed and not arrested and detained could be granted self-bail. The fact is that Dr. Ismaila Cisse was invited for questioning on the 31st of January 2018 around 13:30 p.m. interrogated for 3 hours, and later put behind bars for 5 hours, with no explanation offered on his detention. Meanwhile, friends and family, including his ailing mother, demanded some explanation from both the officers at the Interpol at the Serious Crime Unit and the Serious Crime Unit, where they all denied knowledge of who ordered his detention or why in fact he was detained. It is one thing to be called for questioning and allowed to leave when that is done, and quite another to be put away in a cage as if you were a criminal or a dangerous animal, and no one willing to explain why that was happening. We would like to close this statement with a quotation from a respectable historian and political scientist, Professor Abdullah Hussain of the United States. Dr. Ismaila Ceesay's comments are thoughtful and succinct assessment of the troubling security environment in the Gambia. Ceesay should be applauded and tapped for a senior security advisory position rather than arrested for raising a national security dilemma that is apparent to most observers. Clearly, Ceesay is being singled out, as he is not the first to express these concerns. Speak to any Gambian. The troubling practice on the barrow of retaining and rehiring key Jammeh loyalists in top security posts is routinely discussed among specialists and laypersons alike. I am still at a loss as to how two Jammeh loyalists from Equatorial Guinea could so easily breach security protocols at the national airport. It is in fact that the Gambia security apparatus have been sidelined by economic forces, a recipe for future instability. The Chief of Defense Staff of the Gambia Armed Forces has said that Generals Ansumana Tamba and Umpa Mendy, who went into exile with Yahya Jammeh, returned home after falling out with him. Gambian among 5 people injured in Italy's drive-by shooting targeting immigrants. The Independent Electoral Commission (IEC) has announced April 12, 2018 as the date set for electing councillors for the 120 wards across the country, whilst mayoral is set for May 12, 2018. The UTG Faculty and Staff Association urges IGP to do the right thing and apologize to Dr. Ceesay for infringing upon his rights. That was all we have for the national segment of the news. We'll be back with stories beyond our borders after the short break.
SMBC News on Beast FM, bringing the back.
Zainab Jabate, and you're listening to SMBC News on Beast FM, where we bring the backstory to your front headline.
I am Musa Balde, and you're listening to SMBC News on Beast FM, on air at 88.5 and online at smbcnews.com.
Welcome back, and be reminded that this is the World Focus here on SMBC News, and I'm Lamin Faal presenting live from BIS FM 88.5. And now to news beyond our borders. In our headlines, bodies of 16 migrants recovered off Morocco coast. Italy's Prime Minister condemns the shooting of 6 African immigrants. Train crash kills 2 in South Carolina. A Russian warplane has been shot down over Syria's northwestern Idlib province. Bodies of 16 migrants recovered off Morocco coast. The bodies of 16 migrants have been recovered off waters near Melilla, a Spanish enclave bordering Morocco. It is the latest in a number of deadly attempts to reach Europe so far this year. According to the International Organization for Migration, more than 240 people have died or gone missing in the Mediterranean since the new year began. African nations to build railway line to connect 10 countries. Their ambitious plans for a railway line to connect East and West Africa.
Students used to be trained on home science, on things that they can do with their own hands. But then it failed because of lack of funds.
Primary and secondary education in public schools is free, but they are crowded and there's not enough teachers or books. So many parents who cannot find space in government schools or afford expensive private ones bring their children to even more crowded, cheap community schools like this one in one of Nairobi's slums.
Our salary scale or our wages, we are still low because this is a complementary school. Whatever we get there, school fees is not enough to cater for the teachers. And maybe I would say we begin by telling them that we only issue a token here.
That token is just about $150 a month at the highest. The teachers here are more fortunate than in the other schools, which pay much less for more work.
This is one of the many community schools in this area. Most are facing the same problems: congestion, teacher shortages, little or no funding. Some end up producing students who cannot properly read, write, or even solve basic equations.
In spell, 56%.
This director of a child education rights group, UWEZO, shows us findings of research done last year. Middle school pupils in dozens of government schools nationwide were tested on literacy and comprehension. Most were below average.
So you are teaching her?
Italy's prime minister condemns the shooting of 16 African immigrants. Italy's prime minister Paolo Gentiloni has condemned the drive-by shooting spree targeting African immigrants, saying hatred and violence will not succeed in dividing us. The 6 African immigrants were injured in the central Italian town of Macerata. Police have arrested Luca Treni, a 28-year-old Italian man who had draped himself with an Italian flag and had been making a fascist salute.
This was a...
The
state will be particularly severe against whoever thinks of no violence. Let's stop this. Let's stop this right now.
Fermiamolo subito.
Tensions in Macerata had risen this week following the discovery of Pamela Mastropietro's body. She had run away from a drug rehabilitation centre on Monday, and police said she'd met a Nigerian drug dealer the next day. He was arrested by police. More than 600,000, mainly African migrants, have reached Italy by boat over the past 4 years, and the centre-right bloc says the vast majority have no right to asylum and has promised mass expulsions.
Italian police said they seized Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf and other white supremacist publications linked to Nazism and fascism from their trainee's home. Police said Trainee had no previous criminal record and his motive for the shootings is unclear. He did stand as a far-right candidate for the Northern League in recent local elections, but he received no votes in the count. Bodies of 16 migrants recovered off Morocco coast. The bodies of 16 migrants have been recovered off waters near Melilla, a Spanish enclave
coast of Libya. The sole survivor told authorities that many were from Pakistan.
He, along with 32 other Pakistanis, were brought to the boat that was waiting in the deep sea off the coast of Zawara. These people were being illegally transported to Europe in the boat, which was in a bad shape. This was being done by the human smugglers.
The International Organization for Migration has issued another warning about the dangers of trying to reach Europe.
African nations to build railway line to connect 10 countries. Their ambitious plans for a railway line to connect East and West Africa. The route will run through 10 different countries, and it is hoped it will burst straight on the continent.
On board the 5:15 train from Dakar to Thiès. Most passengers are on their way home after a long day of work in the city. Trees, many of them landlocked. It's called the Trans-African Railway Project.
The Trans-African Railway line could take decades to complete. Welcome back, and be reminded that this is the World Focus here on SMBC News, and I'm Lamin Faal presenting live from BIS FM 88.5. Bodies of 16 migrants recovered off Morocco coast. Italy's Prime Minister condemns the shooting of 6 African immigrants. Train crash kills 2 in South Carolina. A Russian warplane has been shot down over Syria's northwestern Idlib province. Train crash kills 2 in South Carolina. A passenger train collided with a freight train in the U.S. state of South Carolina, killing at least 2 people. More than 70 people were injured and taken to hospital when the Amtrak train collided with a CSX
system has been heavily criticized by President Donald Trump. He's pointed to its accident record as reason to push for more spending to refit the network of roads, rails, and airports.
Tonight I'm calling on Congress to produce a bill that generates at least $1.5 trillion for the new infrastructure investment that our country so desperately needs.
But Trump's budget proposal to Congress to be submitted this week calls for slashing Amtrak's operating budget and rail investment grant.
Nepal's migrant work.
With an unemployment policy, they have no choice but to leave the country, and many fall into the traps of unscrupulous middlemen. Birunu Thamang went to Qatar to work in the food and beverage industry. He failed a medical test in Nepal, but the local agents told him that they would fix it. The cost of his trip, including flights and bribes, added up to $2,500. But when he reached Qatar, he had to do the medical test again.
After they did the test, they sent me back. I ended up with no job and debts.
Birenu alleges the middlemen paid off Nepali officials, including airport authorities.
The government's Department of Foreign Employment received more than 2,000 complaints from labourers during the last fiscal year. These include everything from non-payment of salaries, fraud, illegal wage reductions, exorbitant fees, and physical and sexual abuses by foreign employment agents and middlemen. And according to government figures, 755 Nepalis died while working abroad.
Each worker has to deposit $15 to the government's Foreign Employment Welfare Fund before they leave. But even employment agencies say that the money has not been spent on those who need it.
With this process, recruitment agencies have deposited more than $50 million in the fund. We can do so much for the workers, but the government is not using this fund properly.
But government officials say it's up to the Ministry of Labour to decide who gets compensated.
Sole surviving Paris attack suspect to go on trial in Belgium. The only surviving suspect from the 2015 Paris attacks is due to stand trial in Belgium. Salah Abdel Salam is charged with trying to murder Belgian police in a shootout while on
in March 2016. The only surviving suspect to the Paris attacks the previous November, Abdeslam spent 4 months on the run, hiding in places not far from his family home. A few days before being caught, he was involved in a shootout with police in another part of the Belgian capital. His trial will examine his role in the crime. Abdeslam is also linked to the bombers who attacked Brussels 4 days after his arrest. Nearly 2 years on, the Belgian government has lowered the threat level, but analysts say Europe remains a target.
On est à la merci d'un attentat, que ce soit d'ailleurs de l'État islamique ou...
Another attack is always possible, whether it's by ISIL or Al-Qaeda or another radical Islamic group. Europe is still targeted by these organisations. What has changed, though, is that since ISIL lost territory in Iraq and Syria, it has lost some ability to train people to commit attacks in Europe. But it is still possible that they'll be able to do it again.
Police say many of those involved in the Paris and Brussels attacks had links to Molenbeek. People here are fed up with the unwanted attention.
A Russian warplane has been shot down over Syria's northwestern Idlib province. Russia's defense ministry says the pilot of the Sukhoi fighter jet managed to eject, but was killed in a subsequent ground fight near the town of Sharahib. Russian military has retaliated, killing 30 fighters in the area. There is confusion over who exactly shot down the plane. A group formerly linked to Al-Qaeda says it did it, though both the Turks and Russians are blaming the moderate group backed by the US.
Allahu Akbar!
This is a Russian fighter jet, shot down by opposition forces. The pilot manages to eject, but he didn't survive. For these Syrian fighters, it's a huge
operation. Borders.
All along that border, a steady stream of military movement. Vehicles, ammunition, and buses packed with Syrian FSA fighters.
And now a recap of our top stories. The Chief of Defense Staff of the Gambia Armed Forces has said that Generals Ansumana Tamba and Umpamendi, who went into exile with Yahya Jammeh, returned home after falling out with him. Gambian among 5 people injured in Italy's drive-by shooting targeting African immigrants. The Independent Electoral Commission has announced April 12, 2018 as the date set for electing councillors for the 120 wards across the country, whilst mayoral is set for May 12.